So, Mark Dolan, I was watching the show last night. You are very full-throttled in your support of Rishi Sunak. Obviously, the great thing on GBNews is that we have presenters who have these different opinions. Why are you so convinced, Mark, that he's the right man for the job, especially given how duplicitous he was when it came to backstabbing Boris?
Well, the good news, Dan, is that it's a strong field, actually. And as I mentioned last night, Kemi Badenoch, Suella Braverman, in fact, I take almost any of them as Prime Minister, with the exception of Jeremy Hunt. Couldn't agree with you more about what you've said in relation to his zero COVID policies or ideas in the course of the pandemic. Thank God he wasn't in charge. And by the way, this idea that Sunak is sort of a treacherous backstabber, first of all, there isn't an MP with a pulse that doesn't have ambitions to reach either the cabinet or become Prime Minister. And Rishi Sunak is therefore an ambitious person. Why do we have a problem with a politician that's organised a potential leadership campaign that started late last year? We need a Prime Minister that thinks ahead, that plans, and that's got his act together. And here's the thing about Rishi Sunak. He's willing to give the public and the Tory faithful a tough message, which is, yes, he's a low-tax Chancellor, and he will be a low-tax Prime Minister, but only when the country can afford it. Because those who want to face down the public sector unions in terms of unrealistic wage demands have to accept that if they want swinging tax cuts, they're going to be total hypocrites, because that adds to the national debt, which Sunak rightly points out is morally wrong because it affects future generations. Plus, it makes no economic sense because it adds to inflation. And just a final thought on the backstabbing. You and I, Dan, will agree that Lord Frost is a hero. What a legend. The mastermind behind that Brexit deal, and an honourable guy.
If only he could be PM.
He was the first. Well, we'd bite your hand off for Prime Minister Frost. Never say never, Dan. But he was the first cabinet member to throw Boris under the bus. I was on air in late December when he resigned from the cabinet. We don't call him disloyal. He just wasn't happy with the direction of travel, and neither was Rishi.
But Angela Epstein, the point is, David Frost did the honourable thing. He resigned. If you believe Nadine Dorries in this exclusive interview with me later tonight, Rishi was actively working against Boris Johnson, actively avoiding meetings to remove COVID restrictions. And then he was planning his campaign.
Well, you're right, there's a few basic things here. First of all, we're in the middle of the biggest cost of living crisis for generations. Why was he not absorbed by that as Chancellor rather than busy plotting regicide? Second of all, he was fined for Partygate. Now, if this is a candidate who wants to restore integrity and a sense of good moral behaviour and the high moral high ground and having an ethical stance, how come he has the brass neck, the absolute front to stand as a potential candidate as Prime Minister when the Prime Minister has gone, and one of the reasons he went was that he was fined for Partygate? There have been questions about the whole non-dom issue. I know it was his wife, but come on, he's Chancellor. Does he not have conversations with her about their tax affairs? Everything stinks as far as I'm concerned. This is not, if we are going to move on into a peerless chapter in politics where we're no longer we're draining the swamp and we're moving on to a higher level of ethical behaviour, where does Sunak fit in all this? It absolutely astonishes me that the irony hasn't been spotted, front and centre.
Charlie Mullins, you're sort of in support of Sunak, right? So how do you respond?
Oh, well, I'm not. You say I'm in support of him. I'm not in support of him.
Well, I read that you said that you would like Sajid Javid as Prime Minister, but Sunak as his Chancellor.
That's number two, but I wouldn't want Sunak as Prime Minister. I think, we all know he's backstabbed. We all know about the tax affairs. We all know about that he's pretending that he was a resident or something in America where he was permanently there. So, I mean, the guy is so wrong, it's untrue. So there's no way he can be Prime Minister. And this was all planned and plotted with him and Sajid, and I think he's going to be fine being the Chancellor, but no way can we have him as Prime Minister. No way whatsoever.
Why do you want Sajid as Prime Minister then? Because he was also duplicitous.
OK, well, many reasons with him. I mean, one thing is I think he's a strong character, and he certainly proved that when I think it was Dominic Cummings wanted to get rid of his staff or change his staff when he was Chancellor, and I think he stood up for that. So it shows he's got some backbone. I think he's an honest guy also, comes from a working-class family that came over here with nothing and built up and got to the position he's got. And I think he's got good qualities. I think that he's got drive, he's got enthusiasm. I think he's got a good character. And I think that people can get behind him and believe him. And I think we need someone like that can actually do what they say they're going to do, finish the job off and basically get Britain great again. And I feel he's the ideal person. I really wouldn't want to see the Chancellor put as Prime Minister, but I think they could work well together, and I would make the risky guy still as the Chancellor, but I'd want to check all the figures and everything what he's been up to. No, I would do. I mean,
no, I would
you've got to check what's been going on. I mean, you know, and if it all stacks up, then keep him there. And I think him and Sajid would work absolutely brilliant together.
Luke Johnson, Alison Pearson wrote in the Daily Telegraph today that it would be the equivalent of electoral suicide for the Tories to put Sunak in as leader, given he's a billionaire in the midst of a cost of living crisis. Do you think people could get over his personal finances, or is Alison right on that?
Well, I think technically he's not the billionaire, it's his wife through inheritance, but he's married a billionairess. And I tend to agree with her that I think probably he is unelectable as Prime Minister, because I think he will be seen as someone who has no comprehension of the crisis facing ordinary people with the cost of living. And, you know, bluntly, he lives on a different planet, and yet he wants ordinary people to believe that he has empathy for their problems. It's simply not realistic. And I think the opposition, the Labour Party, would tear him to pieces. I think there are probably other candidates there who would be more formidable threat to the Labour Party that they would struggle to deal with. And I think the Conservative MPs and indeed the members of the Tory party have to think very hard who would be the biggest threat to the Labour Party and therefore most likely to get the Tories re-elected whenever they call a general election.
Now, Jonathan Hassan, you have lived through many of these Tory leadership elections, but I believe you're concerned about how dirty and how nasty this campaign already is.
Yeah, it is. And good evening, Dan, and to fellow colleagues on the panel. Thanks for having me on. My message to my panel friends actually is, you know, get a grip, guys. We're talking about Rishi Sunak being a very wealthy person. Well, you know, look at Sajid Javid. He's not short of a bob or two. He worked for an investment bank who was trading various interesting sort of financial derivatives that gave us the 2009-2010 financial crisis. You look at the current Chancellor, again, not short of a bob or two, got a massive portfolio of property, founded YouGov, he isn't short. And I think you've got to face up to reality here, which is actually all of the action we're seeing at the moment, all of those contenders who are in the fight are giving ammunition day by day, by the barrel load, to Labour when they come to the election. And they need to think very carefully about the way in which they're conducting it, because going through to two people endlessly to then find that we have, you know, a candidate that the membership can rally around, and then saying, actually, we all love each other, guys, isn't realistic. And
Angela, how do you respond to that?
Contemplate how it is actually going to conduct this party and this election. Yeah. And they're doing it extremely badly. And it's up to them to persuade us that they can act with integrity and act as former cabinet ministers in many cases to put forward a coherent case for a Conservative government for another term. And they're not doing it at the moment.
Angela, does Jonathan Hassan have a point there?
Yeah, I mean, look, we need a candidate who I think needs to steer the party back to good old-fashioned Tory values, and that's clear. But what's happening is there's so much noise in terms of the sheer number of people who are scrambling up this greasy pole because they want to be PM. And I'm with you with what you said at the beginning, Dan. I'm still mourning the loss of of Boris Johnson. I think Rishi Sunak is untested. Yes, he's been Chancellor, but he put us added billions to the national debt with the furlough scheme, then told us to eat out to help out, which helped propagate the rise in COVID again, which to me smacks of really poor judgment. There's a lot of wannabes there. I mean, what one columnist said, I think they said it about Ben Wallace's family couldn't pick him out in a lineup. And what we're seeing here is naked ambition. We're seeing naked ambition amongst people who cannot say, hands up, I have a peerless record here. Each one of them, for one reason or another, has something that could be held against them, to different levels of gravitas. Whereas I'm not hearing anybody saying, look, I want to do this for the party. There's too much ego.
So Angela, So actually, Luke Johnson, is there anyone who's exciting you if it's not Rishi?
Well, I have to say, I think the biggest threat to the Labour Party will be Kemi Badenoch, because I don't think they'd know how to handle her.
She's impressive. Jonathan Haslam, what about you?
And, she's very young, but she's the same age as Cameron was when he became leader of the Tory party.
Really? Didn't know that. Yeah, she's not that young. Jonathan, outside of Rishi, anyone else who's exciting you?
Yeah, Dan, the answer to this one is Kemi Badenoch is just not electable because nobody knows who she is. We are going to end up with Rishi Sunak versus Liz Truss. I'm fairly convinced of that. Tom Tugendhat is a character of quality and he needs to get a position in the cabinet, but he'll find it hard to get through the second round. And the rest of them, as Angela has said, are virtue seekers. They're just not going to get there. And
Charlie, do you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I can go along with that. But, look, there's a lot of them that are out there trying to jump in the seat, but a lot of them are not capable. And so many of them are going to prove that in the next day or two when they do the signature voting thing. But I think also realistically, Pratik Patel was in with a chance. She wouldn't put up with all this nonsense. So she wouldn't put up with all this carbon emission nonsense, and she'd get on with a job that we need to get on with.
Jonathan says not a hope in hell.
What?
Jonathan Haslam says not a hope in hell, Charlie.
Really?
Oh, pretty.
Well, I mean, she's in. You say that, but why would that be then? OK, people don't like the fact that she says it as it is, and she actually gets things done, and she's got a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of drive.
And she's a Brexiteer, which is key.
Charlie, she hasn't got things
done.
Well,
whether she's Brexiteer or not, I don't see that matters at the moment.
All of the issues we have with online abuse. She hasn't solved anything. She has
final word to you, Mark Dolan.
From an ethics advisor who said she should be sacked.
Mark Dolan, final word to you. You've heard all of this debate sparked by your support of Rishi. Anything that you've heard tonight that's made you think twice or has particularly resonated with you?
Well, ABH, anyone but Hunt. That's my predominant thought about the leadership election. I think you know what? It's a party of great talents. How hilarious that this ultra-diverse offering comes from the Tories and not Labour, who are endlessly banging on about
Not Labour, who
diversity,
seem obsessed with white men.
Yeah, they really are. So I think actually it's a good news story overall because I think it's a strong field. I'll just say one thing, which is an intervention from the paper that you write for, the Daily Mail. Dominic Lawson writing about his father, the greatest post-war chancellor we've had, the man responsible for the total economic boom in 1987, serving under Margaret Thatcher, Nigel Lawson, and he said his father would approve this approach, the prudent approach from Rishi Sunak. Yes. Margaret Thatcher wrote in her memoirs how painful it was in 1981 that she couldn't lower taxes, but the economy was in such a bad state. But of course, she turned things around and the rest was history.
What a great debate from my political masterminds, GBNews star Mark Dolan, businessman and Pimlico Plumbers boss Charlie Mullins, entrepreneur Luke Johnson, journalist Angela Epstein, and John Majors, former Number 10 communications director Jonathan Haslam. Thank you all. So who do you agree with? Is Rishi Sunak too duplicitous to be PM? Matthew on email says, yes, Rishi reminds one horribly of Norman Wisdom, Lee Evans and Ben Stiller. But behind the awkward persona lurks a cunningly ambitious get-on. Don't be taken in by that gawky presentation. From Carl on Twitter, the Tories have just ousted the only person capable of securing them another election win. This is the biggest act of self-harm since Theresa May lost her majority after calling for an unnecessary general election. Rishi is toxic. And from Helen on email, apart from the fact he's a backstabbing, duplicitous snake. Alan's going for it. His biggest problem is that he's a Liberal Democrat. We have no proof of that, but I understand Helen's point. Your verdict now, and whoa, bad news for Fishy Rishi. 92% of you agree that he's too duplicitous to be Prime Minister. Just 8% of you agreeing that he's the right choice. Bloomin' heck, he's not going to like that. Thank you so much.